ready for some really advanced in-game technique. The Grandmasters here got it wrong, and I want to see if we can learn something from this. So if you're under 2000, this is going to be incredibly advanced, but I think it's fun to look at, even just from a beauty in chess sort of standpoint. So don't feel discouraged if this seems crazily difficult, but I think it's nice to look at. I'm going to show you the concept at the end, and hopefully it'll help you solve the second one. So at the European Team Championships, we got this position, and it involves a really important game for the match. So Turkey v England, and this game is actually going to decide how the match goes, because if England hold this one, they've won the match. I think they're 2-1 up going into this game. And if Turkey win, they've equalised it. This is a really difficult position, and we can turn on the engine. We can see it's minus 4.8 to black, and it seems like it's won quite easily, but you can see by result it's actually was a draw, because black, who's a grandmaster, missed what to do here. And this is such a difficult position. Asked in the Elite Chess Discord what's this position, and not a single player, even a lot of them over 2000, not a single one could get the right move for black here, which wins. And this is really advanced technique, and it's something that I'm not expecting people to know, but what I want to do is the actual concept to understand, because if you get in your own games, there could be a point where this concept that wins here for black we could use. So let's look again at this position. So immediately we can see black has this lovely pawn on e3, and he's also got the power of this rook on, which can swing to down here. But at the same time, white has this pawn which can push this way, and we can see immediately that there's a lot of depth here. And if black is sloppy, let's say plays, I don't know, rook c2, then suddenly white can probably push and be fine. The move is f4, sacking a pawn for seemingly nothing, right? I mean, if you look at this from just basic view, it's like, why are we doing that? It's, well, what's changed about the position? Why is this the winning move? Because white can obviously just take this pawn, right? So it looks like it's the exact same position as before. But as we're going to see, it changes the dynamic quite a bit. And let's quickly go through some of the other moves that don't quite work. So rook c2, just b5, and white's fine. Now the move that I'd be tempted by would be to go like this straight away. But here, king g2, and unfortunately, black isn't, fast enough. King f3. And the big thing here to remember is that this pawn actually blocks the rook. So black can't play rook f7. In other words, that pawn actually gets in the way for black. So that pawn actually stops a transition into what would be a winning endgame. Because let's have a look, and we'll go back to, I know we'll just check the other tries, but we'll see the difference here. So in the game, just quickly show what his opponent did. He went king e4, which is quite natural to bring the king in, but after just b5, it's just it's kind of flashy, but it was quite a basic draw in the end. But the key thing here, if he'd played f4. Now let's compare this to what we previously looked at, which is rook h7. So if you remember, king g2 was the reply, and then we blocked with king f3. But now, after king e4, we can actually use this pawn being here for our own advantage. So let's say white played something like b5 here. We go rook check. King has to move. If he goes back to f1, king f3, we're going to go e2, and we're going to go rook g1. So here, if he goes king h3, just e2. And it's going to be a checkmating threat with king f3, rook h, or king just comes to f2. We're going to queen. So you can see this pawn is actually getting kind of in a way for white. So white's best move is to try and give it away. But it doesn't change an awful lot. Because again, same technique. We're going to play e2. Let's say white tries this move. We're just going to threaten to bring the rook down. So let's say king g1. Say, I don't know, f6. So the best move, according to the engine, for white to try and hold on here, it's still like -7 is f5. But then after just rook g7, say king here, king f3, where it's actually mate in 20, whatever, but yeah, it's just completely won. I guess white has to try something like rook b3, then we can just swing around, and yeah, it's just lost. So going back into this position, in the game, black obviously went this way, went wrong, but the important thing for us to learn from is to try and transform positions into technically won endings that we already know. Because if any of you watching this have done some endgame work with like Turetsky's endgame manual or whatever, you know that if we take this position, this concept of swinging the rooks around and stuff like that, we already know the technique to win, but we're just sort of transforming the position. And by getting this pawn away and using it to sort of block white, it's incredibly advanced, because even now you're looking at it, you're like, what was the real difference? But so essentially we're transforming the position into something that we know is going to be winning, because we've got this rook check, and we go back here, we go rook g7 now, it's not a check anymore. So king f3, we're actually equal. It's also worth noting that we tried it now. We're just a tiny bit too late. And white can actually hold the balance by pushing. So knowing the concept of the previous game and how to transform a position to one we know. So here we have a game between Soham Lahir, who's an English junior, very talented player. He's over 2,400. And he's playing an Indian international master. And the position is 0.0. But we can immediately see that black is the one pushing for a win here, right? Because we've got the extra pawn and white's just having to hold on. Now, white being a pawn down probably influences him a bit here. But if we remember the concept of transformation, perhaps we can understand why this position is 0.0. Because if we look here, white actually only has one move to keep the balance. And in the game, unfortunately, the young English talent played rook b8, and unfortunately it loses because of rook d1. And essentially, black's king comes in. Now, I think it's kind of cool to have a look at why. Because after here, these pawns kind of get in the way again. So in the game, this pawn blocks white and allows black to come in and just have a completely won position. Now, going back, Now that we know what happens in the game, can you guys in this position think to yourself, having looked at the first game that we've had, what should White be thinking of here? So yeah, that's right. White, pawn down already, can actually get an equal ending here by transforming the position and sacking a pawn. I thought this was really nice, a nice concept, and it's kind of crazy, right? You don't really think if you're a pawn down, you don't think sack another one, especially in an ending. But we look at the engine. If black takes this, okay, we can actually transpose into, well, not transpose, but if you've done your rook and pawn endings to a high level, you know that this is like a draw. Because whenever this rook moves away, we're going to take this pawn, and if the king gets to here or so, we're going to start checking. And basically, black can't really make progress. So let's say king e4. Now rook b8. And yeah, let's say king d3. We're just going to check. And yeah, it's just a draw. So actually the engine doesn't even want you to take it. So the engine wants you to actually play rook d1. And the problem is we have the exact same as in the game, but this time, well, we can do this and we can do the checks. So essentially, we're going to force black to take f5 and then 3 against 2. This is actually quite we know our technique. This is an advanced endgame thing. I'm going to presume that you guys already know that this is drawn. So, and I know that's kind of a really advanced thing. But what I thought, it kind of shows that the technique needed at this high level. So yeah, that was a kind of quick thing, but I thought it was really instructive. High level endgame technique there. Cost 2 players in big matches. It cost them in really big and important matches. One of those games cost Turkey the match in the European Championships, and it's a big match for them. And the other one cost, one of England's brightest talents, a GM norm opportunity against, a very strong player. So these huge and complicated endgame technique, anyone can go wrong in them. But if we know our basics of what's won and what's drawn in rook and pawn endings, we can start to, in our own games, look at ways we can transform the position by doing those crazy pawn advances. We should always look out for them. It could really help us. Anyway, I know maybe not too useful for many people, but I just thought it was interesting. Cheers.